Yo, what's going on, guys? Your boy and Putty God is back at it again, this time with a different type of video. So, as you guys see in the title, we're going to be talking about every single Valkyrie evolution. So, it's going to be kind of an informative video, but also just giving you guys my personal thoughts on this series of Valkyries. And honestly, it's just freaking awesome. I've been a fan of Valkyrie from the beginning, from the very first Valkyrie all the way to the newest one, Josie Valkyrie. And you guys are pretty much aware that it belongs to Vault Awoi, who we got to know and love as the main character of Beyblade Burst, at least until Josie. And of course, the avatar, or I guess the beast behind Valkyrie, is a warrior on a horse. So that's kind of like just miscellaneous information, but we're going to get into every single Beyblade or every single evolution of Valkyrie right now. And I'm not going to get too into detail because I don't want to make this super long and rambly, but I also want to give you guys just my thoughts on every evolution. So it's going to be just more to just learn about these Beyblades. I think it's awesome to share information. And once again, this is just my thoughts and just, I guess, what I know about each Beyblade. But without further ado, we are going to start off with the first evolution, or I guess first version of Valkyrie, that being Valkyrie Wing Excel. So, we're going to start off with the driver, that being Excel. Excel is a flat driver which provides a pretty basic attack pattern. It's just the first attack driver. It's the flat tip. It's just as basic as it gets. There's really nothing else to talk about it with this. It's just really basic. Next, we got the disc, which is Wing, and this disc actually looks kind of cool. Unfortunately, it's really light, and therefore it wasn't even used a lot at first. It's just a really bad disc, but it has a cool design, so it's just kind of whatever. Now lastly is of course the layer, that is Valkyrie. Now Valkyrie was actually one of the best attack layers of its time when it was released. It has a really sharp and just aggressive design, and if you run it on attack setups, it was doing really good. The problem came when people started noticing that the layer itself, its teeth would just disintegrate. So Takara Tomy did kind of a problem here, I guess a failure, with the teeth weren't that durable and they would wear out. So an ordinary Valkyrie layer would only last about 10 matches before it became useless. And that was crazy to a lot of people. A lot of people did have to stock up on this layer who were running this in tournaments and whatnot. But that's just an interesting part about this layer that I'm sure maybe a lot of you guys didn't know. But overall, Valkyrie Wing Excel is obviously the first of the Valkyries. It's pretty basic and simple, but the layer proved to be very good for attack. Unfortunately, it was held back by weak teeth that just disintegrated. Now moving on, we got probably one of my most favorite evolutions of the Valkyrie line, and that is Victory Valkyrie Boost Variable. So this is of course incorporating the dual layer system, so it includes both the clear plastic with solid color plastic. And we're just going to get into this. We're going to start off with Variable. Now, Variable is a very interesting driver. It is the first of its kind. It is basically a driver with, I guess, points on the end that are supposed to wear down over time. And with enough use, you end up with a really flat, aggressive driver. And as you guys can see, my Variable is fully worn down. Now, the anime incorporated this as an awakening. So Vault used it so much that the driver wore down and it became super aggressive. The cool thing is that you can also do it in real life, and it's just a really awesome one-of-a-kind driver. Now, it's not really that good for much combos, but it's still a cool gimmick, and it's just unique. Now next, we got Boost, and Boost is also a disc that looks really cool, but it proved to be too light to be useful for anything. So unfortunately, it got the same fate as Wing, so it wasn't used a lot. And besides that, we got Victory Valkyrie. Now, this is one of the most beautiful dual layers in my opinion. Honestly, without stickers, it just looks horrible. So you want to put stickers on this bad boy. But basically, Victory Valkyrie is a very, I guess, aggressive layer. It proved to be pretty good for attack at the time. However, it was also held back by a breakage issue. So, if you guys weren't aware, the first releases of Victory Valkyrie had a different mold where the wings would snap off in battle. And that was insane. A lot of people were experiencing breakages. Thankfully, Takara Tomy did address the issue with not one, but two reinforced versions of the Victory Valkyrie layer. And overall, Victory Valkyrie is just one of those favorites for me. I love the idea of Variable and it just wearing down. But also the layer is just a really cool design and it proved to be pretty good for attack. besides the breakage issues, it was also a really cool evolution. Now next, we're moving on to God Valkyrie 6 Vortex Reboot, and this is of course the God evolution of God Valkyrie. It features a God chip in the center with a V, and we're going to get into that in a little bit, but we're going to start off with a Reboot. So Reboot is actually very drastically different from Variable. In fact, it had its own little gimmick where the driver itself starts off in a semi-flat type tip, and then eventually, once the stamina wears down, it exposes the more aggressive, jaggy, or I guess spiky style tip, and it becomes aggressive. Now this gimmick is actually borrowed from Big Bang Pegasus, which was a Beyblade in the previous generation, that being Metal Fight Beyblade, but this was just a plastic version of this. Unfortunately, it was also met with a similar fate where some reboots were not working. In fact, my reboot didn't work that well. I had to modify it slightly for it to work better, but other reboots later on were more improved and fixed. Cartomy did seem to notice the issue, and they did address the problem. So most reboots nowadays do work. Now next, we're going to move on to the frame, that being Vortex. So this Beyblade does use a frame, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with, and it was, I guess, one of the first frames to be released. It was actually pretty heavy at the time, so people did use it quite a bit, and it is three-sided, so it worked perfectly with Valkyrie's three-sided design. And it's also a nice red color, it really just kind of complemented the Beyblade itself. And it also provided weight, if you guys didn't know. So in the anime, Vault gets rid of the frame a couple times to give God Valkyrie a little bit more speed, and you can actually do that in real life too. If you choose to remove the frame, you end up giving your Valkyrie, or your God Valkyrie, a little bit of a speed boost. And apart from the frame, you got the disc, or I guess core disc, that being 6. So 6 is also one of the number discs, and unfortunately, it was also a pretty useless number disc. It has a cool design once again, but it's really light, and so not a lot of people used it, so it didn't get much use. Other than that, we're going to move on to, of course, the layer God Valkyrie. Now this layer was also really interesting to me. It features a spring in the layer, so basically there's two pieces to the layer. The top part moves with the spring, and as it makes hits, or theoretically, when this layer makes hits, the top part of the layer gets, I guess, bounced back by the spring. And you'll see in the clip right now. So yeah, this layer featured a really interesting gimmick. Unfortunately, it didn't really work much for attack. Rather, it was more suited for defense. And then, of course, it does feature a God chip in the center, which you guys can easily replace with a Metal God chip or even a Strike God chip. And that's going to move us on to the evolution of God Valkyrie. Now, I'm going to consider this an evolution, that being Strike God Valkyrie 6 Vortex Ultimate Reboot. Now, the only difference here is, of course, the layer and driver, but I am still going to consider it an evolution. We're going to move on to the driver, that being Ultimate Reboot. Ultimate Reboot, as the name implies, is basically Reboot but with a rubber tip. So Ultimate Reboot was first released as a Koro exclusive driver, and it was really hard to get. No one really knew it would be released on the Valkyrie, but eventually it got released in a Twin Nemesis booster, which even threw more people off. But sure enough, in the anime, Vault did put it on his God Valkyrie. So if you do want to complete your God Valkyrie, you are going to have to get an Ultimate Reboot, either from the Koro or Twin Nemesis. But either way, this driver features a rubber style tip in a reboot gimmick, so it's just a little bit more aggressive. And we're just going to skip over to the layer now, Strike God Valkyrie. So instead of utilizing the spring gimmick, it actually uses the Strike God chip, which was only available at the time on the Mugen Stadium set. So you had to buy an expensive Mugen Stadium set to get the right colors and whatnot, but you could also get it through other means now. Anyway, you put the Strike God chip on the layer and it prevents the layer from moving at all, and it also exposes a little bit more wings. So I guess it makes the layer a little bit more aggressive in exchange of removing the spring-loaded gimmick. Now, it also looks really, really cool. I think the God or Strike God chip really does bring out the design more, and it just looks a little bit more complete. But overall, this Beyblade looked, I guess, much better, and it was just a better rendition of the original God Valkyrie. And moving on, we are going on to Josie. So, of course, in Josie, Cartomy kind of threw us a curveball here. They introduced us with Winning Valkyrie 12 Volcanic. And we're actually going to start off with the driver, that being Volcanic. Personally, I'm not a big fan of this driver. It's kind of like a smaller hole driver. So it's kind of free spinning and it's really aggressive. It's extremely hard to control, and I'm just not a fan of it. So Either way, it's very aggressive and just crazy in the stadium, and some people like it, some people don't, but I'm just not a fan. It just seems so out of place considering we went from Reboot to Ultimate Reboot and then to this just volcanic. It was just so weird. Anyway, we got the disc, which is 12, which is also met with the same fate, that it's a very light disc. In fact, it's one of the lightest discs, and to top it all off, 12 is known to break other layers. If you guys aren't aware, 12 is very sharp in its design, and if it's spinning at very high speeds, it will destroy other layers. So my piece of advice to you guys is to use a frame with it at all times. In fact, the WBO, aka the World Beyblade Organization, did address this problem. They pretty much force you to use frames on it, because if you don't, it's illegal for tournament play. So remember kids, use a frame on your 12 discs, you won't regret it. Other than that, it's a light disc that would have been kind of cool to use had it not been restricted by the frame. Unfortunately, it's a little too dangerous to use without a frame, so you kind of have no choice. And then we get to the layer, which is Winning Valkyrie. Now, the name is kind of meh, I'll admit, but the design is sick. It's a take on pretty much, I want to say, Victory Valkyrie, but with metal now. So it's got a lot of metal in it, and it's a really heavy layer actually. It's also very aggressive and just a solid layer. People still use it for attack to this day, and I think it's awesome. It has a really cool, kind of just metal, simplistic design. Something about it just strikes me the right way. It's awesome. Now this layer didn't really have any breakage issues, and it's been released in a lot of colors for some reason, but it's still really cool. Whatever color you put it on, it looks sick. I'm definitely a fan of also these stickers. Takara made a good idea of including clear stickers to put on the metal. I don't know, it just added a little bit more of a flair on the design, which just made it a little bit more cooler. Moving on, we got the final evolution, I guess the latest evolution, but we got Josie Valkyrie. Now Josie Valkyrie is in a league of its own, if I'm being honest. So we're going to start off with Evolution, the driver. Evolution is pretty much an upgraded variable. If you guys remember variable that I talked about earlier, Evolution is just a taller version of variable with a different type of plastic. It's more of like a rubbery plastic. Either way, the gimmick is still the same. The ends wear off, or in my case, I cut them off, and it exposes a flat, aggressive tip. Now, this tip isn't really that good for attack or I guess combos, but it's still fun to use, and it's just an awesome little gimmick that I'm glad Takara brought back. Now moving on, we got the disc, which is Zenith, or Zenith, however you want to pronounce it. This is actually a letter disc, which is kind of odd, but instead of a number, we get a letter disc, and this incorporates pretty much a combination of a regular disc with a frame. So it has a plastic piece to it with rubber on it, so it's actually very heavy, and it also has a three-sided design, so it's pretty much perfectly suited for any Valkyrie, really. And the fact that it has rubber on it is just even more cooler. If it does make contact with the disc, you know you're going to be packing a punch with the rubber contact points. But overall, I'm a big fan of this disc, I'm not going to lie. I really do dig the design. It looks sick. And then lastly, we've got Josie Valkyrie. Josie Valkyrie, I'll be honest, it looks really cool, but it is a different take on Valkyrie. I feel like Winning Valkyrie really was going in the right direction, but Josie Valkyrie's a step in a different direction, which could be taken either way. I like it for what it is, but I feel like the design is just kind of out there. It didn't really resonate with me, and it didn't really seem that, I guess, similar to previous Valkyrie designs. Either way, it's a very chunky, bulky, full of plastic layer. There's not a lot of metal, which is weird because Winning Valkyrie had a lot of metal. And on top of that, it features the burst stopper gimmick, which is, of course, part of the Josie line gimmick. It basically has a wing where a piece gets pushed in and then the burst stopper activates. It basically doesn't prevent it from bursting, but rather makes it harder to burst. And you guys can tell in battles, it's pretty hard to freaking burst, I'm not gonna lie. But either way, I like this evolution of Valkyrie. It's really cool for what it is, and it's kind of growing on me, I'm not gonna lie. But either way, the Valkyrie line has been proven to be very, very popular. Probably not as popular as Spriggan, I'm not gonna even mention Spriggan yet. But overall, it's got a really cool design. I'm a big fan of just the design and the whole series in general, and I'm hoping to see more evolutions in the future. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, guys, see ya.